All right. Welcome, everybody. Welcome back. And thank you again for listening. And thank you again for watching, everybody. Some of you are on the phone and some of you are on video watching. So I appreciate you. I know it's been a long day for everybody. Again, if you didn't get to hear me, this next virtual summit will be March 7th. That will be on a Wednesday, March 7th. So be sure to join us. Or if you have somebody who can utilize this platform, I would love for you to have that person contact me. Either contact me at info@chosenpathglobal, info@chosenpathglobal. Facebook is under chosenpathglobal.com on Facebook. That's on my page, or on my profile. You can also connect with me under Lady Christie. So I hope that we all building a community, coming together, helping and collaborating with each other. You know, one of the men that I really respect is a man called a man, excuse me for a minute, a man by the name of George C. Frazier. He said that when you cooperate, one and one equals two. But when you collaborate, one and one equals 11. And that's what collaboration is all about. You can accomplish a lot more when you collaborate with other people. You are able to have more pies rather than trying to get the pie all by yourself, right? When you have so many people sharing a pie, everybody gets a piece, and you're able to go around and get another pie. When you keep that pie to yourself, it might take you a longer time to eat the pie. So it's all about collaboration. When you collaborate, one and one equals two. And I hope you hit to that, because that's what makes the world go around. So without much talk, I'm going to introduce my next guest. My next guest is my friend. Her and I met back in last year, actually. We met when I spoke at the Public Speakers Association conference in 2017. And we kind of hit up, and we've been talking and connecting with each other ever since. So I am super excited that she has agreed to be a part of this platform today. So who is my next guest? My next guest is PK Eastman. And what she's really known for, among everything else that she's known for, she is a writer. She is an author. And she has written or helped authors write their stories. Help everyone that wants to share their message. But sometimes you want to share your message, but it's difficult for you to get it out. She is that person that can help sense out of your story. And her topic, story away. And I'm going to unlock and bring her in. PK, I have to unmute you. Did I do?
Unmuting me is
welcome,
welcome,
welcome.
You know?
So
hey,
welcome.
I'm so glad this worked out this afternoon, and I'm so happy to be here. And I really hope people enjoy this. Those that have been here throughout the day, we're going to do a fun little thing here in a minute. But let me just do a little more introduction. I am PK Eastman. I live in beautiful St. George, Utah. It's about 60 outside today, and so spring is coming here. And I know Christy lives where it's nice and warm. I have friends who are living in the midst of Noah's Ark's time. It's been raining for 20 days, and it looks like it's going to rain for 20 more. So I invite them down, but they can't get a big enough boat, or they can't find 2 oars or something. So anyway, let me just give you a little thumbnail sketch of me and then get into the good stuff. I'm one of the older people, Christine knows, and you know what? That's kind of fun for me. Because it just means that I can justify all the things I say, because they're all based on experience. You know, young people have energy and I have experience. So, you know, it's sort of a trade-off sometimes. I am a storyteller. I am the finder, well, that too, but I am the founder of Right Time with an R, R-I-G-H-T, Right Time right now, WRITE. So it's hard to explain when we're talking, but it looks great when you see it on my business card and on my website, not website, but other, my Facebook. So here's the deal. I was an only child for 5 years, and then my mother had a baby boy. And I just presumed that my brother wanted to hear every story that I had learned in 5 years when I was this only child. So I started telling Rick stories when I was 5, and really have never quit. I loved English and writing in grade school and junior high, and found that English was just really my thing. I know it's weird. It's really weird. But it was not just the English, it was the stories that you could tell with words. And some of them I read and loved, some of them I didn't. I have to just say, in all honesty, today, at age, I have never read Moby Dick from cover to cover. So, you know, Cliff Notes were alive and well back then, and occasionally I used them. But for the most part, I loved the stories. I could go anywhere I wanted when I was 12 and 13 and 14, because all I had to do was walk a block and a half to the local library and pick up a book. And I could be, really, I could just be everywhere, and I could talk about that forever, but I want to get straight into this. So as I got out of high school, I had an English teacher that I really loved, and I thought, she's got the greatest job in the world. So I went to college and studied English, and the running joke among my friends and part of my family was, please don't tell Kay's dad that she is taking a Shakespeare class or a continental literature class, or, you know, even majoring in English, because he really thinks that she plays the piano in kind of a notorious nightclub. And so he wasn't thrilled, but, you know, I was the oldest, and so I did have a mind of my own. I taught high school English for several years and then left that as a career for once and for all when we started, after I was married and we started having children. And you know, this is what I learned. We start telling, our brains are wired. Oh, that's backwards, isn't it? Our brains are hardwired for story, because if you interview mothers that are carrying their first, second, third, fourth, in my case, sixth baby, we start telling our babies stories before they're ever born. Oh, I'm so happy you're going to be here. You're going to love this, or I'm so happy I'm going to teach you this. So, and science says that children at least respond to the voice. They may not get all of the words, but they get used to that voice. And when we tell stories, we generally will have a rhythm in our voice that is different than when we're just talking and having conversation with our family members or our neighbors or our business associates at work. So after I had some children, I just needed to go back to school. I just loved being in school and learning. So I went back, but not in English. I got my master's degree in clinical social work, and I did private family therapy for a while. And here's what I've learned through all of that. 2 things that I have learned. Number 1 is that, as I just said, our brains are hardwired for story. We learn when our adults tell children, or, you know, when adults tell us as children stories. The story of Little Red Riding Hood is, don't leave home because there may be danger there. So there's value in that story beyond just telling the ABCs of that story. And then we teach by story. 90% of what we ever remember, we can connect to a story. And it may be the story itself. It may be a collateral story. You know, back when the earth was cooling, as my children say about me, the teachers read to their to us as students after lunch. We had a quiet time in grade school. And I remember this one teacher so well because she read to us fabulous stories. And everybody's probably heard of the story Pollyanna. And we use that all the time, not all the time, but we say, oh, that person just has a Pollyanna attitude. Pollyanna thought everything in the world was wonderful and would always end happily. That same author wrote another book called Nancy and Plum. And if I could, it's a rare book now because of who wrote it, but it is so much better a story than Pollyanna. But I remember the details of that story because it was read with passion and conviction and heart. And I remember the lessons of that story. The lesson in that story was, you know, no matter how anybody acts towards you, you are valuable and you have a right to be who you are. Aren't we still saying that message today? Don't you hear that, you know, in trainings at work and from people online? So there are story threads that stay with us forever. So that's the one thing I know. We are addicted to, because our brain is wired to, stories. Now here's the second thing, and not more or less important, but so significant. Every person born and, you know, surviving long enough to learn to speak and understand language has a significant and compelling story. They individually may not know that, but it is true. And those stories are as individual as fingerprints or snowflakes. And so I have built a career and am loving my work because it is my job now to help others find their story. Some people say, there's nothing, I don't have a story. Well, you haven't spent an hour with me, because you do, and you may not know it. You may think you have something, but here's the thing, you undervalue that story. So my job is to help you find your story, define it, refine it, write it, and be able to tell it. Not that you're going to speak on a stage, but tell members in your family, tell your cousins, you know, tell your best friend the story of your life, because it matters. And this is why, and this is what individuals don't understand. Every story is sacred. Every significant, compelling story that a person has is sacred. It has been given to you, and I don't care if you call it God, I don't care if you call it Buddha, I don't care whether you call it spirit, you know, experience. Call it whatever you want, but it has been given to you by the universe, and it is yours, and it is yours alone. And not only has that story been given to you, you have also been given all the tools, all the talents, and all the gifts you need to survive that story. And most people, many people, I won't say most, but most of the people I encounter do not connect those two things together. Your story is sacred. Your gifts are special for you. And that's what we work on. And that's how your story that you maybe diminish or don't see any significance in, it's critical for you to know that. It's critical for you to understand the links in your stories, the potholes in your stories. That's where the most value comes from. The time you wrecked the car, the time somebody you dearly loved walked out on you, sometime when you went into the service, your best friend didn't survive and you felt guilty. Those stories matter and they need to be told. And what my job is to help you find those stories, help you tell it, help you understand it, help you find the power in that story. And then we're going to write it down and preserve it as your legacy. You become a bridge between your generation, and if your story includes anything, and I hope it does, and I work hard for that, to talk about your parents, you know, where you came from. Here are the 4 questions. Who are you? Where did you come from? What will you die for? Where did you learn that? That's the basis of your story. And we can build a legacy for you based on those 4 questions. and write your story and preserve it for your children and your grandchildren. Maybe you have no children, maybe you're single, but your nieces, your nephews, somebody needs to hear that story. And I want to tell you why, and I'm going to do that by telling you a short story. So settle back, take a deep breath, and let me tell you about two different Mary Elizabeths. Mary Elizabeth I was born in about 1820. By 1840, she was a wife, and by 1843, she was the mother of 4 children. Now, just hold that thought. Those children grew up, they got married, they had kids, those children grew up, they had kids, those children grew up, and 2 or 3 generations, there was a young woman named Mary Elizabeth after this great-great-great-grandmother. Now, Mary Elizabeth lived in, let's say, Colorado. I honestly don't remember because it's not important. She had good parents, and she went by the name of Lizzie. So Lizzie had had a great life, and she had had everything that was really needed. She got into the college of her dreams and got a degree in computer journalism or something. That doesn't matter either. Here's what matters. We're going to go back now. Lizzie is graduated from college and is looking for a job. She can't find the job she wants. Her roommate moved out. Her car isn't in good shape anymore. And life, down the toilet. Isn't that something we say? She would say, if it weren't for bad luck, I would have no luck at all. She's just worn out. She's given life all this effort, and at 22, 23, and now 24, she has not moved forward from when she graduated. She's disheartened. She's discouraged. She's on the phone with her mom crying. I worked all this hard. I did all these things, and I'm going nowhere. What am I going to do? And her mother said, sit still for an hour. I'm going to send you a story. I want you to read this story about your great-great-great-grandmother, the one after whom you were named, Mary Elizabeth Wells. Lizzie could not see any great value in just reading a story from almost 200 years ago. But she had nothing else to do. She had no job, no roommate, and currently was out of boyfriends. So her mother, through the miracle of technology in this era, sent a story to Lizzie. And this is the story Lizzie read. When Mary Elizabeth was 23 or 24 and had 4 children, her husband they lived on the frontier in a little one-room cabin with a loft upstairs for bedrooms. Her husband was called through his work to go to England. Now, that was not a 4-hour flight, work for a week and come home. That was a long trek to the boat in New York. It was an overseas, how long it took, I don't know, but it was like this, over the river and through the woods and across the seas to England. He was going to work there for several months before he was going to be able to come home. As it turned out, he was there almost a year. He left at the end of winter, early spring, and so all through the summer, things were fine. Mary Elizabeth, they had crops they planted because they were self-sufficient out in this sort of wild frontier area where they lived. When her husband left, their youngest baby was only several months old, so she had her hands full. 8, 6, 2, and 0. That's about how families were back then. The fall came and they did what all farm families do. They put away some grain and they dried some beef and probably slaughtered a pig and whatever, and hoped and prayed that they would have enough to survive the winter. As fate would have it, this was a cruelly cold and long winter. Before spring arrived, there was very little food in the larder. The grain was almost gone. There was no meat. And Mary worried day to day, Mary Elizabeth worried day to day where she would get the food to feed her family of 4. Her baby was sick. There was no work. And she wasn't alone. It wasn't like the neighbors down the road had lots of stuff they could bring. They took care of her because she was a single mother, right? But still in all, they had their own families to feed. And their storehouses were close to empty too. One morning early, Mary got up and was in the kitchen area of this one-room cabin trying to figure out what she would fix to feed her children that day. As she worried and actually prayed a little, Lord, help me, I don't know what to do, she heard a noise, an unusual noise outside the door between the house and the barn. She looked out the window and couldn't see anything. She was quiet, and then she heard the noise again. So she carefully crept to the door and opened the door, not at all sure what she was going to see. When she looked carefully, about halfway between where she stood in the doorway and the barn was a huge deer. Mary couldn't believe it. The deer should not be in this part of the country at this time in this cold. What was this buck doing there? Mary stepped back quietly, barely closed the door, not wanting to make a single sound. Behind the door, she took the rifle off the gun rack. She positioned herself, and with one cracked shot, fell that deer. I know some of you are crying, but I'm telling you this is not Bambi, and it is the way the West was won. So just hang on to the end of the story. Mary had helped her husband on other occasions gut and skin some of the game that he had brought home, and even some of the livestock and animals that they raised to provide sustenance for themselves. So she put on big boots and a heavy coat. She couldn't drag the deer very far. It was just too big and too heavy. So she gutted it in the snow, and then later that day got some help dragging it over closer to the house and she got some help so that it could be butchered and she could store this. Now, she didn't need a freezer like you or I might need. The ground was solid and there was snow. So that meat was wrapped in who knows what, maybe nothing, but kept fresh and not fresh, but fresh frozen in the snow to be used little by little. Mary now had food for her family, and for that she was immensely grateful. But beyond that, she had a deer skin. She got that deer skin tanned, and she cut it into pieces. She made boots for her 8-year-old and her 6-year-old, because they were indeed old enough to sometimes run to the barn and get something. But in the cold, it wasn't easy. She took other scraps of that and made a couple of vests for her kids. And what the little scraps that were left over, she cut those pieces very carefully, and she sewed 4 pair of gloves. Gloves for her own hand and gloves for her 3 oldest children, so that they could go out and bring in some wood. And as the ground began to thaw, even though it was still cold, it would still be cold, they would have warm deer leather gloves to wear outside into the fresh air. When Lizzie finished reading Mary Elizabeth's story, she was not the same whiny, self-pitying young woman she had been when she read that story, before she read that story. She learned that she had a great-great-grandmother after whom she was named. And that woman was a strong, courageous woman. She took care of her family in the most daunting of conditions. Lizzie took notice. She sat up and she said, "Oh my goodness, I have a computer. I have a television. I have an iPod. I have a cell phone." All these things that she had not appreciated. All the things that could help her find a job. She had shoes. She could get up and go outside and walk up and down the streets and knock on doors and walk into shops and hand out resumes if it came to that. She wasn't going to freeze to death. She wasn't worried about where her next meal was going to come from. Lizzie was transformed by the story of her great-grandmother because she understood this one essential thing. The very blood and the very genes, the very DNA that helped Mary Elizabeth literally save her family from potential starvation, ran in Lizzie's veins. Lizzie knew that she came from courageous stock. She knew that if her grandmother, great-great-grandmother, could do that in those times, whatever Lizzie needed to do to take care of herself today in Denver, Colorado, she could do. Now, I don't know personally Mary Elizabeth, obviously. I don't know if she was transformed by that story, but I will bet you nickels to donuts that she was not the same person when her husband returned home from England after a year. She had journaled, she had kept notes about what life had been like without him. And I believe with all my heart she appreciated him more when he got back. I believe that when her children read that story, they were grateful for a mother who stood to protect them, to love them, and to nurture them, again, in spite of enormous odds. Now, you maybe never have skinned a deer. You maybe never find about what you have or haven't had. But then again, maybe you have. I'm a firm believer that psychological challenges, depression, anxiety, eating disorders, just being out of a job for months and months are stories that build courage. If you are here today and you have survived any tragedy, any trial, any struggle, any tribulation, you are a better person for it. I promise you that. Your story is powerful. It will transform you, and it is a gift that you can give, first of all, to yourself, and next to any other person who reads it. I totally and thoroughly believe that your story is yours, but it is your obligation to share that story. Someone, somewhere, needs to hear how you pulled out of a nosedive. And whether it was easy, whether you got some great magic to do it, or whether it took you months, maybe years, doesn't matter. It's that you did it. Maybe you are in the middle of it and you think you won't make it. That is a great time to begin telling your story. Because when you tell what you've been through, you will see how much courage you have, how much stamina you have that you don't recognize, and it will make the rest of that journey easier. That's another promise I can make you. Your story is just as powerful as Mary Elizabeth. Get your story down. And I always tell my clients to say, well, I'll do it. I probably could do it, but I'm going to wait. Let me tell you something. You don't know when your last chance will be to write your story. You all know people who are probably planning to take a vacation or someday go wherever, and they didn't make it. Life can be cruel like that. And I am not Debbie Downer by any means. I hope you can see that. But your story is for now. It is not for later. Because here's the honest truth. Here's the honest, ugly truth. If you don't tell your story right now, somebody else may tell that story and tell it wrong. They're not you. they cannot do your story justice. So I just want to tell you all, I love helping others find their stories because I know from experience, both personal and working with my clients, what a powerful time it is, and to see that come to completion and say, wow. And it doesn't matter if you live another 25 years, we'll just write volume 2. It's that much fun. You have a story and you have it now. And here's what I'd like to tell you. If you believe you do, you need to chat with me. If you believe you don't, you really need to chat with me. So what I'd like to offer anyone who hears this presentation and mentions Christy when they get in touch with me, I do consultation calls that are 45 minutes, and I charge $297 for those. But I love sharing this message. I just believe you can use your story for business. You can use it for pleasure. But it's meant for someone, and we will get it right for you to have whenever you need it. So you can contact me. I don't have a bunch of websites. I do a lot of one-on-one work. So you can contact me at PK Eastman. It's on the screen there maybe. At pkespeaks@gmail.com. Really simple. You can find me at PK Eastman on Facebook, P.K. You can find me there. Call Christy. She has my number. I'll give you my number, 503-347-9559. Let's talk. I want more than anything to hear your story.
All right. All right. Thank you so much, and I appreciate you. I thank you so much, and for really taking the time and really come and share with our audience. And audience, you know, like I said, sometimes people don't really have the time because everybody's doing something at each time. So they will get to watch this video. My hope is that they get to contact you and take advantage of this offer. So I appreciate you. We're going to see again and collaborate.
Well, I love working with you.
Thank you.
We're on the same vibe.
Thank you so much. So I am going to, at this